Licensing is just a small part when you compare it with another broad regulations and certifications.
There's a lot of movement that is being restricted in Canada. There's a lot of challenges for the small businesses, especially different regulations among different provinces make it really hard for a business to grow in a different province. It will be better for us to move forward and increase the trades among all the provinces.
Are there any barriers to it? Are there any issues with CFTA? How can I work with CFTA? If I have a business, would I have any kind of issues if I'm working through the CFTA? If you are sitting all the way in Alberta and you want to send something to Ontario, not only do you have to cross 3-4 provinces just to enter Ontario, which also means that you have to abide by 3-4 provinces worth of exceptions and 3-4 provinces worth of licensing just to cross through, just to arrive in Ontario with your product.
Businesses at that point are growing from province to province.
But
That's a
again,
beacon of
Sunny,
growth.
why did the Liberal government not come up with these in the 9 years of government that they are running?
We are here to discuss a few topics for the day, and beginning with that, small businesses, they make up of around 98% of the Canadian market, employing around 8 million of the Canadians.
The trade within Canada is in itself a very controversial thing, Sunny, especially these days. If we see there is so much going on in terms of trade within Canada, within amongst the provinces, and quite frankly, I still think a lot of people were completely unaware about this. I still think people didn't even know that we had some instruments, some agreements, such as the Canadian Free Trade Agreement in place. Now, these are some agreements that exist within Canada to streamline how we conduct business, how we trade amongst from one business from one province into the another province. And this is something we are going to dive into this today. Sunny, why don't you kick this off to this episode?
There's a lot of movement that is being restricted in Canada, which we'll deep dive into. But all of these things wouldn't be in place if Canadian government took the same commerce clause into the impact.
Now, Canada Free Trade Agreement, while it has its own benefits and advantages for you to invest or for you to conduct business from one province into another, at the same time, you have some disadvantages as well. These are some disadvantages that other businesses are feeling. For example, if you are a alcohol manufacturer, if you are producing alcohol into one province, and let's say you want to trade your product into some other province, well, you have to deal with a lot of licensing regulations. Licensing is just a small part when you compare it with another broad regulations and certifications. If, for example, there is a foreign person who is coming into Canada on a temporary visa who might have some skills that are required by industries and businesses in Canada, if he wants to travel from one province to another, he might not be able to do so because what one province might consider one province might recognize his skills and certifications, other province might say we don't even recognize these skills, that you have to do another entire course just to be able to practice whatever skill you have in their province. And then second thing could be trucking. When you are moving produce, when you are moving product, when you are moving anything between the provinces, the trucking companies has to bear this brunt. They have to apply for permits, they have to get permits anywhere from weight restrictions to what kind of product you're taking into from one province into another. So there's a lot of complications that exist when it comes to seamlessly doing trading, conducting business under the CFTA from one province into another. I can go much more, but I'm gonna give a chance here, Sunny, to explain you guys even much better.
There's a lot of challenges for the small businesses, especially different regulations among different provinces make it really hard for a business to grow in a different province. And a few of the things are trucking restrictions, the liquor laws in various provinces, and the licensing certificates for the tradespersons to perform their work related tasks in different provinces. So there have been some proposed policy reforms that have been coming up with the current government and the upcoming opposition as well. Opposition leader Pierre Poilievre's poly opposition leader Pierre Polivier, opposition leader Pierre
Any opposition leader, Pierre
Polyev.
Polyev.
Opposition leader Pierre Polyev is also proposing for mutual recognition system to simplify interprovincial trade. Trudeau has already put forth CFTA in 2017, which is a step forward, but still remains a lot of barriers to those interprovincial policies and rules and regulations. Canada is moving forward to avoid all of this because currently speaking, we have in a few months back, all this while being imposed around 25% of tariffs on all goods and services. Uh, it will be better for us to move forward and increase the trades among all the provinces that we already have, and that will boost our Canadian economy domestically, and it will be a step away from all the international markets that we're moving forward with.
There is a lot of things that we have to keep in mind especially when we're conducting businesses, especially for all the youth that are coming with all the wild ideas right now in Ontario to start their businesses. Moving on, I'm gonna shine some light on some of the barriers that people might have some questions regarding. If you have something called a CFTA in place, and there are some huge things making headlines, such as some changes being made among these tariff changes to the CFTA, people might still be asking some questions. Okay, now I know that there is something CFTA that exists in Canada. Well, are there any barriers to it? Are there any issues with CFTA? How can I work with CFTA? If I have a business, would I have any kind of issues if I'm working through the CFTA? Well, there are some issues. Some people already know how to move around those issues, while others, they are still trying to figure out their way, if they can even survive or how long can they survive. But according to a 2019 report, there are some there are some barriers to this Canada Free Trade Agreement on how you can conduct business from one province into another. Now, some of the barriers, they can definitely contain geographical issues, in which corner of the province, or in which corner of which province are you settled in? Where is your business that exists? How long? For example, if you are sitting all the way in Alberta and you want to send something to Ontario, not only do you have to cross three, four provinces just to enter Ontario, which also means that you have to abide by three, four provinces worth of exceptions and three, four provinces worth of licensing just to cross through, just to arrive in Ontario with your product, all the way to minding the weight of the product, what kind of product you are carrying, and if Ontario's licensing, the permit system in Ontario will even allow you to sell your product in that province. Second barrier could be prohibitive barriers, such as restrictions on the sale of alcohol, not just alcohol but on other items as well. But this is one of the examples I can give you regarding alcohol. Uh, right now, if we see, Sunny, there are certain regulations when we talk about the sale of alcohol. For example, what I mean by that is Ontario, government of Ontario owns exclusively all the liquor stores, LCBO. They control the licensing, they control the ownership, and they control the sale. And what kind of liquor bottles are showcased on the shelves and are available for sale to the people in Ontario. Now, what that means, if, for example, I am a manufacturer of alcohol, let's say the Value Mint alcohol, and I am manufacturing this alcohol, for example, in British Columbia, and I want to expand and scale my business. Now, if I want to scale my business by selling my alcohol into Ontario's LCBO stores, not only do I have to comply with the LCBO rules and regulations, I have to obtain their permits, which is a huge lengthy process all in itself. What that means, if let's say LCBO allows my alcohol to be on display and to be showcased in LCBO stores, and people get a liking to it, people develop a loyalty to my brand, well, that is definitely going to hurt the sales of LCBO other bottles, other wines and alcohol that LCBO is retailing, is selling. And LCBO might say, we are taking your alcohol off the shelf, and definitely they can do this because that is hurting their own business. Mind this, Sunny. LCBO ultimately is owned by the government of Ontario, which means all the sales that LCBO is doing at the end of every single year has to send a kickback to the province of Ontario. If you're going to LCBO, you don't think if my dollar is going to the province or to the LCBO. You are just buying an alcohol, going home and enjoying your day. But LCBO, the CEO of LCBO, has to send a kickback to the province, which the province can use however the premier wants, be it reducing deficits, be it operating the province, be it hiring more people for different agencies, etc., etc. An example could be Quebec's French language bill. Now, the French language bill in Quebec that the premier of Quebec came out with is that every single sticker and every single label on every single product that is being sold into the province of Quebec has to have a French label, has to have French administrative compliance papers, and all the employees, if you have a subsidiary of your business in Quebec, all the employees that you hire must be French speaking. If you originate your business in Ontario, if you open a subsidiary in Quebec, you cannot hire people that do not say French, that do not speak French. You have to hire only people who can speak French, and if you cannot, you have to explain the province officially why are you trying to hire people who cannot speak French, or why are you hiring people who can speak both languages. So these are some unnecessary complications to the CFTA that people have to try to move around. But while they do that, they have these unnecessary additional costs that they also have to bear. Now, what would it be? Imagine a case where you won't have these unnecessary regulations. How easy would it be for small business, for the youth who is thinking to start a new business, to conduct his trade from one province into another? That is something we can definitely look into. What do you think, Sunny?
I agree. There have been already a few examples that are real world scenarios that has already happened. Um, Talking about liquor restrictions among the interprovincial uh, scenario, the very main case that came up was RV Como in 2018. Gerard Como was fined for bringing alcohol across provincial borders, leading to Supreme case that upheld the existing regulations, emphasizing the complexities of interprovincial trade laws. Now, in that particular case, we see that the interprovincial policies restricted an individual uh, to bring alcohol from one province to another province, and I believe the same goes for all the businesses as well. Imagine an individual not able to do it, and then imagine a company that is trying to upsell or trying to grow in a different province. That company is going to follow the same rules and regulations as well. So if that is the case, how can we make it easier for these companies to implement or to grow in itself in Canada? Forget about talking about international borders. That itself is like a tariff on a company.
Well, how far can you really succeed into business if you have so many barriers? I mean, what exactly is the point of doing a business in Canada when you cannot do things seamlessly? What is the point of adding unnecessary complications for a small person? Remember this, Sunny. 95, almost 90%, 95% of all the Canada is being supported on the backbone of small business. Forget about those trillion-dollar companies. Think about the small business who is employing more people than a trillion-dollar company. How much can all the Walmarts combined in Ontario give employment to how many people in Canada? Now imagine all the small businesses that exist in all the corners of a city, the municipalities, and all the corners of province. I mean, talk about northern Ontario. Talk about the northern provinces. Even in harsh weathers, there are still some cities in Ontario that can only be accessed through either boats or through railways. I mean, you can't even drive there, and there are people still conducting small businesses. And when you add these unnecessary, overly complicated, completely unwanted complications onto these businesses, well, think about yourself. Would you want to do business in Canada, or would you want to do business in some other country? I don't know, maybe say US, who have less complications, more volume, more population for you to be able to sell to.
The small businesses, they face a couple of months of delays in obtaining permits throughout different provinces, and that itself goes through municipal regulations, provincial regulations, and then federal regulations to just complete one task that they are handed over to just to get a permit, and that itself complicates their own process. Imagine the amount of administrative tasks that needs to be done. Imagine the amount of labor that is involved in all of that, and imagine the cost that the business has to acquire even before starting the business. All of these delayed processes, or delayed in time, or delayed in labor, all of that is acquired by the business even before stepping into the business world itself.
That is entirely true. Uh, Talk about building a small gas station in Ontario. Talk about opening a small building, a gas station, not a big chain, maybe a small gas station in a corner of a very beautiful city. You have to go through an enormous amount of licensing permits, regulations just to be able to start up a gas station, and you don't even know yet how much sale you're going to be able to accomplish from that gas station. I mean, we invested into a gas station, Sunny, me and my family. We invested into a gas station close to Windsor, Ontario, and we had Petrocan as our competition. And trust me, uh, just the licensing and regulations, just to have those environmental impact assessments be done on the gas stations, and various other licensing and permits. Regulations that a gas station has to go through, and talk about financing for these gas stations as well. Not only do you have to go to these regulations, but you also have to think about how the banks will fund you. Even the bank themselves, they have their own quotas. The bank themselves, they have their own regulations. I mean, these banks, they are coming out with their own regulations and their own statements. Then we won't fund all the companies who are producing gas emissions because Justin Trudeau wants to apparently implement a carbon tax that is 90% are still completely confused about what exactly it is. I will get into that more a little bit later into this podcast, and I have a few questions about that as well from the audience too. But let's just focus on this topic. I think one of the primary examples that you should look at, Sunny, is the Green Belt Initiative plan that Doug Ford was trying to implement. Now, what that Green Belt Initiative was that Doug Ford was trying to open up some land that was secured under the Green Belt Initiative. To talk about it in more simpler terms is that some of the land in Ontario is protected under the Green Belt Initiative in order to protect the wildlife, to protect the endangered species, and the government tries to not construct on these places. What Doug Ford did, he tried to open up this land to complete on his campaign promise of building 1.5 million homes. And the area that he opened up in the Greenbelt area on the Niagara side of Ontario, he was trying to come out with 50,000 more homes so that he can increase affordability for the people in Ontario. In my opinion, I think that this could have been done a little bit better. This could have been handled a little bit better. And rather than building homes in a green belt designated area, you could have done that by introducing a little bit more subsidies and grants and rebates for builders to develop more houses in Northern Ontario, which is still suffering through a lot. I mean, there are still cities in Northern Ontario where population does not exceed more than 10,000 or 9,000, 11,000. However, speaking on this Greenbelt scandal, um, when he opened the designated area under the green belt, people came out with a lot of issues. Green belt was designed to be there to protect the endangered species, to save the wildlife, to not to be able to touch the land which is not stable to build houses, and yet this is exactly what he does. Um, and even the Auditor General of the province came out and said that when the decision was made by the Premier, it was extremely rushed and was favored into some specific developers' terms. I mean, the according to the Auditor General statement, if we go back and check, Sunny, in 2022 news is that some developers were benefiting over $8 billion with the kind of projects that they were introducing in the Greenbelt area.
Well, licensing and permits, if there is a slowdown in licensing or retrieving the permits, that in itself will slow down their processes to get new hires to transact in different provinces or even in their own provinces for that matter. If municipalities are not active, if provinces are not active, if federal rules and regulations are not complicated, all of that will ease out for the business itself to grow in the industry that they're trying to step in, or in the industry that they have already stepped in, but they're trying to grow another branch in their own province or in a secondary province. For example, like you mentioned, for in Quebec, their language model has to be French when they're implicating any packaging or any of those rules and regulations, or even their admin tasks when they're filling out the forms and everything. So imagine if somebody residing or somebody operating a business in Ontario is trying to shift or trying to open up a new branch, because Quebec is one of the closest province to us. So let's say they're trying to open up a new branch in the area, and the very first thing that they're gonna encounter is what? French language. So they would have to have somebody that is acknowledgeable in French and can handle all the aspects, all the rules and regulations, all the admin tasks, and all the hiring done in Montreal, or in Quebec, and navigate through that scenario.
Talk about federal and provincial policies being able to ease out for the small businesses to conduct their business. Um, I was talking earlier about the environmental impact assessments that small businesses have to go through. And again, I understand if a lot of you are not completely aware of. I think this is the best time for you to open up your notebooks, grab a coffee, and take some notes on this. Environmental impact assessment is something that small businesses talk about. If let's say you are a skilled person who knows everything about cars, you know how to fix cars, trucks, automotives. Let's say you're trying to open a mechanic garage. Let's say you're trying to invest into a gas station. Let's say you're trying to do anything that requires or a use of oil, or to the containment of any kind of oil, whether be it engine oil or whether be it petroleum or anything. You have to be you have to be able to get permits from the environmental agency, and they give you a permit. Sounds easy, but when you try to get and obtain these licenses, it turns out to be a major obstacle and hurdle for everyday businesses to something to be for them to be able to obtain. What I mean by that is just the process alone to get a certification from EIAs, from environmental impact assessments, is a headache in its own. It takes multiple months, could take years just to be able to get environmental impact. When you buy a land from somebody and you have to get an EIA done, it can take anywhere from 6 months to 2 years, sometimes even 3 years, depending on where are you buying the land. And again, if you are buying the land in Greenbelt area, that's even going to take even more. And how will a small business survive? Because if let's say somebody is trying to start a business, they have to go through this permit process of getting an EIA. If you are buying a land, you have to be able to get funding from a bank. How will you pay the bank while you're having the EIA? You are only going to be able to pay your mortgage back to the bank if you have an income coming through from the business. If you haven't even started a business, if you have already taken financing from a bank to purchase the land, and the EIA process alone is taking you 6 months, 1 year, 1.5 year, how are you going to be able to pay the bank until the next 1 year before you can even begin the construction on your project? So this is something which can become a very huge issue from a small scale to a very big scale. And this is what I feel that the liberal government has to address when they are talking about reducing restrictions, reducing barriers in the CFTA. And trust me, this does not only exist in Ontario. I am speaking to you from Ontario, but if you look at the other nine provinces in Canada, they also have some similar programs in place. And these permits, these licensing, unwanted, unnecessary permits, they can really hurt small business on a very huge scale. Um, Not everybody has $2-3 million cash sitting in their pockets to go out there and buy a land or buy a business in cash.
A few topics that we are going to touch about. Couple of them, namely forced cancellation of cap and trade system. What is cap and trade system, and how we have in British Columbia we have a more robust IP support programs. We can compare that to the US incentives and how does US take in part of that, and compare that to our current federally regulated policies and rules in place, and how is that that when we look at an overall aspect of Canadian market, compare that to US market, see what we can learn from the US market or see what we can learn from the Canadian market and try to implement or at least push forward for those changes that could improve our IP regulations here in Canada itself. Now, Trudeau's government has been criticized for not matching the level of IP protection and innovation as it is seen in the US.
I mean, the Trudeau government has been in power in Canada for the past 8-9 years. Why haven't they done this before? Why are ultimately all the citizens now talking of shifting to US? Why haven't we seen this progressive moves being made in the 8 years of the Liberal government? When you're talking about IP, I think there are a lot of youth who have already started their businesses but have completely no awareness about what IP really is. IP eventually is trademarking, copywriting, and patenting and protecting your intellectual property. Now, if you buy a real estate asset, that's your tangible property. What about all the non-tangible items that you own? You have to protect those as well. For example, let's just say if you have an idea, you bring that idea into life. If I am a tech company and I come out with a software that really helps all these service-based businesses, let's talk about an accounting industry right here, Sunny. If I am a tech company, I come out with a software that really helps all the accounting firms connecting the accounting firms with each other in order to provide better service to their customer base. And let's just say the software that I come out with doesn't really have a lot of competition. That software, again, unlike a real estate, it's not tangible property, that's a non-tangible property. And what young Canadians get wrong here at this point is that they have to protect their software. The name of the software, the branding of the software, the slogan of the branding, the patenting and the trademarking and the copywriting. Seems like a lot, but initially all this stuff is extremely important so that you don't have a competing business coming out with the exact same software, trademarking before you do, and exceeding better than you. Because now, if they trademark or if they patent or if they copyright before you do, well, the software belongs to them. You will become a copycat, even though you came out with the original idea. That this is how IP is not being taught, I think, good enough to the citizens in Canada. And I think Liberal government should take some ideas from British Columbia's Premier David Eby, who came out with something called Accelerate IP that actually trains and gives grants in the amount of somewhere between 20 and $25,000 to young Canadians as long as they fulfill some provisions under that program. But the main part for to focus here is that giving the proper amount of training, giving the proper amount of amenities uh, for the young Canadians to be able to learn about these things so that they can act from the very beginning, from the get-go when they are launching their business. There are again 1,000 other things that come under this topic, but this is where I'm going to leave right now. What are your thoughts about this, Sunny?
I agree. Differences between Canadian market and US markets are very straight, where US is providing direct subsidies for all of this IP integration, whether it being clean technology, research and development, or any of the linking that has to do with innovations for a company to grow. It could be, say, moving away from fossil fuels towards more clean energy producing. All of that requires new technology, new research, new development, figuring out which pathways the company has to take in order to implement that. Now, those things, they actually have a limitations in terms of the company, when they're producing something, they have a cap on it. So if they are overproducing or something like that, they will have to pay whatever the quota is based on the rules and regulations by the province. On the other hand, if somebody in US is trying to implement some new technologies, they are given grants. It could be in a couple of $1,000s and stuff like that, but that is a direct compensation for the company, and they can use that grant right there, right then, to improve on technologies and stuff like that.
Yeah, I think you're slowly shifting to the cap and trade system. The cap and trade system in Canada has been also very controversial back in 2017 when the premiers were changing when during the elections. Kathleen Wynne, who was the premier of Ontario until 2017, right before Doug Ford came into power, she had the system in place. And by the way, Quebec still has this system in place as of 2025. So eventually, what cap and trade system did or the way it was introduced is that if you have, let's say, an industry that was working and producing a lot of carbon emissions, um, in that case, they had to be they had to disclose that to the province. And there was a cap that was set on these industries, on these businesses, in terms of how much carbon emissions can they really emit. And if they went over that limit, before what used to happen, and some most of the countries as well, they would get new permits, or they would have to be able to apply for new permits from the government, from the or provincial government in this place. And what Kathleen Wynne did, she stopped giving out those permits, and what she did is something in line with Trudeau's messaging in terms of carbon pricing. What that means is, if let's say you own an industry and you are producing a certain amount of carbon emissions, and let's say you are producing even more greater quantity because apparently now you have too many buyers of the product that you're manufacturing. Well, if you have more carbon emissions producing from your factory, you cannot buy more, or you cannot apply for a new permit from the provincial government, or you cannot try to apply for a new permit from the provincial government. What you would have to do instead is reach out to another business, and if they are producing carbon emissions less than what you are, you would have to buy excess permits that they do not need, since they won't be reaching to that cap. And you can use their permits. You have to buy their permits, and you can use their permits for you to be able to produce more. And what businesses were doing, they were reselling these permits for a greater price. Now, granted, this was bringing in additional revenue to the province, but again, this was hurting the industries. If one business is selling, the other industry has to be buying that for a greater cost, because there was no cap set. There was a cap set on the carbon emission that you were producing, but there was no cap set on how much you can resell a permit for. And eventually, when Doug Ford came into power in 2018, that is the first thing that he chopped down. He took out the cap and trade system. And I actually think that that is not a very bad thing that he did there. Quebec is still doing the cap and trade system in line with the Trudeau's carbon pricing, but I still think industries are far better situation in a far better place right now without the cap and trade system.
I see there have been changes with the current Doug Ford's government, and compare that to David Abbey from British Columbia. David Abbey has been expanding their trades training, which in turn is having their own in-house training for the tradesmen to complete, have apprenticeship in place, and they are developing the skill labor in that terms. On a Doug Ford's aspect, I see that they are launching funding to have to have new and targeted skill set of workers in special trades where they need the most out of employment in.
During COVID, I don't think a lot of people remember this, and some even might. The the bigger issue that was emerging was a shortage of skilled labor. I think we have a lot of people in coming into Canada, and given the $2,000 checks that the government was giving out under the CERB and CRB plans, there were a lot more people in other countries who were extremely interested in coming into Canada. But all those people, all the influx of that people who is deciding or who's coming into Canada, well, you never know who might be skilled enough to be able to take the industries to a next level. Um, low low unemployment, especially in skilled trades, that is something which is going to hurt businesses even more. Talk about quality versus quantity. I think this is not a time we should be talking about quantity. I think this is a time that we should be talking about the quality. In the period of 2022 and 2023, the government said, okay, the workforce that we currently have in Canada is an aging workforce, and we need to let more people come into Canada. And as a result, a lot of people did came in Canada within that period, but a lot of people that did came into in Canada under the immigration programs were not skilled enough. And that is something I have an issue for, because all these unskilled people who are coming into Canada, rather than starting their own businesses, they are going into existing warehouses, existing businesses, and they are doing low-level jobs, which is not going to contribute to the productivity of the overall landscape in the country. Now, you need a skilled labor, you need a skilled workforce who can actually come up with brand new ideas that people in Canada have not come up with, where they're coming on shorting. And you need to look at some other province as well. If the federal government is not coming out with some unique creative and innovative ideas onto how to implement the immigration policies, you should take some examples from some provinces, for example, Saskatchewan, who are creating some really interesting provincial nominee programs where they're letting in more skilled labor for them to be able to increase the productivity of the province.
When they pass rules and regulations on capping out how many immigrants they are bringing in, provinces have their own quotas to see how much of a labor shortages they have in their own province based on skill sets. When we are talking about high skilled labor, I think you're going on the right direction where you're pointing out various skill set or unskilled labor like general labor or task that you do not need a certificate in. Few of the high skill labors could be named as tradespeople, say mechanics, electricians, plumbing. All of these scenarios, along with furthermore, they all consider as skilled labors. However, we are bringing in less skilled labor because we had policies in place that bounded for example, the express entry. It wasn't designated so much on the variance in what skill set you have, but it was more based on a point system which you could acquire based on how much education you have, how much experience in a workplace you have. All of those scenarios ended up increasing our labor, but it increased our labor in the non-skilled workforce, which we were already having a lot in. Now, skilled labor shortages were there. There could be some changes that we can do. For example, just talking about it, we could implement few programs. Now, provinces are doing it already, but we could push forward on more skill labor merit based system. Which I mean is, for example, if province is already lagging in electricians, that's the only trade they look out for first to fill it out. Now, I'm not saying that's the only trade they should look out for. What I'm trying to represent is they should narrow it down based on what skill set, what employment data they have, and how much open jobs that they have in the market and how much they're supposed to fill. Now, there's two pathways you could choose from. A, you increase a skill labor force from all the international countries that we have, which is immigration to us. Or second is you increase the funding in the domestic land. You create more funds available for, or more incentives for the residents to take part in the labor market or the labor force. That way they have a incentive in place to learn a new skill, a new set, even tradespeople, which the governments and provinces are already doing it. And I see that could be a good direction to the next economic growth for Canada in.
Yeah, the growth of the country is what everybody is striving for right now, Sunny. And I think the way the government currently issued the immigration system, I really do not agree with how they handle the immigration system in Canada. I think they could have done a much better job in terms of unskilled and skilled labor. But you have to control the levels of immigration, levels of people, the amount of people that you're letting into the country. And I think it's going to be really interesting if we do see um, the elections in October, how they turn out, if we have the new leader from Liberal government continuing his position after the October elections as well, if he does win the seat, or if Pierre Poilievre comes into power, or somebody from NDP. It's going to be extremely interesting to point out. But uh, check this out, Sunny. The more people you let into the country, if let's say somebody is coming into Western provinces, Northwestern provinces, say Saskatchewan, say Alberta, how long do these new people stay in those provinces, Sunny? I don't think they stay in those provinces very long. Despite them having robust nominee programs, these people, the moment they land into those provinces, from whatever countries they're coming from, they still end up in Ontario. Why is that the case, Sunny? Why is it more and more people on temporary visas coming into Ontario? Could it be for work? Could it be to have a better life? No matter the situation, they are still creating a huge pressure, a stress on the housing, on the healthcare, on the resources that they are squeezing from the province. I mean, the province eventually has to even spend more. I mean, let alone the residents, the citizens of Ontario, of Canada, even the immigrants, even right now, they are not able to buy their first house in Canada. The more people you are welcoming into country, the more people you're bringing into this province, the less amount of housing is going to be available for the existing citizens in Ontario. According to the Canadian Mortgage Housing Corporation report in 2023, just to be able to, just for Canada to be able to restore the affordability in housing, Canada needs to build a 3.5 million more homes by the year 2030. Do you really think Canada has the capacity and ability right now to build 3.5 million more homes in the next year, 5 years? We are living in March 2025. Canada has less than 5 years total to build 3.5 million more homes just for them to be able to restore the affordability for the young Canadians, for everyday citizens. And with the new and high amounts of immigration coming into Canada, that goal seems even more farther away. Even a small 1,500 square feet townhouse, a house is going to cost you somewhere between 450 and $600,000 if you go over the ends. If you live in between in Toronto side, that's going to be even more expensive. But just check on the extreme poles. If you try to buy a small house, 1,500 square feet, even a small condominium, say a one bedroom, one washroom, that is going to cost you somewhere between 450 and $600,000. And if that's just one condominium, that's just one housing unit that's costing you that much, imagine how much 3.5 million homes is going to cost the government of Canada. They are estimating, according to 2023 CMHC report, they are estimating almost $2 trillion that the Canadian government has to spend by the year 2030 just to be able to restore affordability to the citizens. And that is less than 5 years for them to be able to do. And with the new incoming tariffs, especially impacting the aluminum, steel, forestry, and lumber industry, I don't think that is even achievable. I mean, this is why, in my opinion, the Liberal government has done a very reckless job in running the Canadian government. I mean, the overall GDP for the whole country in Canada right now is sitting at less than the complete GDP of just one state in US. I believe that was Texas. I believe it was Texas with the annual GDP in 2022 or 2023, something like this, at sitting at $2.7 trillion versus Canada sitting at $2.2 trillion.
We discussed with the interprovincial rules and regulations, if we were to able somehow take them off and we were to extend the GDP by another 150 or 200 billion, God knows how much, if the reality comes to true, but that's another $200 billion added to a 2.2. Imagine if businesses at that point are growing from province to province,
But
that
again,
we're gonna
Sunny,
grow.
why did the Liberal government not come up with these in the 9 years of government that they are running? Why are they just coming up with these ideas right now? If you are telling me that with the rules and regulations that they're taking down and CFT is going to add another $200 billion to the economy, why did they not come up with these ideas before Trump won? What happened in the last 9 years, 8 years, 7 years, 6 years? Why did the businesses not have that opportunity in the past? That means we had even more opportunity for growth that all of us missed out on.
Recently, we just received a report that in February 2025, the restrictions in the CFTA were reduced from 39 to 19 now, almost 20 restrictions that are being reduced or being lowered for the free trade to happen in the interprovincial occupancy in Canada. Now, why is that just hitting the market after the threat of 25% of the tariff? Is that the reason, or is it somehow to do with that was their plan in place? I do not know about it. However, I see the threat of tariff is also letting the government flow in a way that they look at the directions in which provinces are trading among each other, and start to decrease the reliance on US or other trading partners internationally. I see that being a good debate amongst the cabinet members to see and somehow steer the direction of the Canadian market in the right place. I do see that we have a lot of opportunities when I say for businesses to grow among the provinces itself. Forget about dealing with international markets. I think we can grow drastically among provinces itself.
Talk about the effect of inflation and interest rates on the way small businesses and young Canadians are conducting themselves right now in Canada. If you were to say a few things about how the federal and provincial policies affect small businesses and young Canadians in Canada, what would you say, Sunny?
I will say Bank of Canada leading the charge with the overnight rate is impacting how small businesses will perform. Now, I'm not talking about larger firms, because larger firms have a bigger capacity to absorb all of these changes. Um, some of the larger firms might not be as well, but I'm talking in general, they will have a better capacity in terms of admin roles, in terms of cash on hand, in terms of how they're going to regulate among different provinces. They would have a better data analysis that already is available and how to navigate those scenarios. I'm talking about small businesses that could have a really knee-jerk reaction when something like that comes on board. Now, we already see in COVID era where there were a lot of loans, a lot of ease on credit, a lot of ease on loans that were distributed for the small businesses, and that really helped the economy to at least not go in a bad economic scenario. Even though it was bad, I'm not saying it didn't went into drastically down the hill. So these things are helping businesses to have a stable, or to have a economic stability. However, the growth is not coming. That is what we're not saying. We are only seeing a stable in environment that Canadian government is trying to engage in. However, the economic growth we're still not seeing. We're still seeing just the day in day out of employers, that they're just trying to make their businesses more stable, but we're not seeing actively involvement in growing the businesses, active involvement in innovations, research and development, new technologies. That is what we're lagging on, and I feel that Bank of Canada holds the key to that. If they lower the interest rate, it becomes easy for them to grow, because they have ease of money on hand, that they can get the loans on. They can improve on various aspect of the operations, be it operations, sales, or putting HR in place. All of these things come at a cost. But if you have a lower interest rate already in place, it becomes easier for the decision maker as the owner to make a decision on. Now, what are the effect of inflation? Just to put it simply, if for example carbon tax was applied, let's say, due to the inflation, the fuel prices are raised by another 10-15%. Who do you think is going to bear the price?
Just the everyday consumer who's buying those items, Sunny.
plus the small business owner itself.
Who are sourcing those
Now,
raw materials? Yeah.
I have a question for you. Now, there's a lot of transportation companies out there. There's a lot of manufacturing plants out there. There's a lot of interlink warehousing in place. Now, I'm just talking about the third party logistical operations that do not produce and do not manufacture, but are a key link in the supply chain. Now, imagine this, if their cost of fuel goes up, who do you think is going to be squeezed more? A small business or a larger firm that is already inbuilt into a trucking business?
I think this is a small business who is going to be impacted the most if there is a even slight increase in the fuel cost, Sunny. Because of the carbon pricing, the fuel prices had to go up, and if these third-party logistics companies have to bear the brunt of higher fuel prices, it's ultimately the small business who is into procurement of these items to the logistical companies that are going to feel the maximum impact.
Now I see the chain. For example, if a manufacturer has to bear the cost, they will pass it on to the consumer, to the customer. However, if if the third party logistic company has to bear the cost, who do you think is going to pass it on to? They cannot pass it on to the manufacturer. So
Yeah.
that won't happen. Like, it could happen depending upon how big the firm is, but
Yeah.
if you have 40 firms in place and there are 10 firms that are larger firms, the small business is going to lose out on.
Manufacturers are always going to bear the cost onto the consumers. A similar trend is going to be able to seen right now, a week from now, a month from now. When you go to a grocery store to buy apples, when you go to a grocery store to buy bananas, when you go to a grocery store to buy oranges for yourself, Sunny. Uh, US came out and they imposed tariffs on the fruits and vegetables and all the produce items that are being sold in Canada. Sorry, that is being exported to US. And like we discussed earlier and in the last segment, it is the if for example a US if for example US imposes tariffs on Canada, it's ultimately the US business who is importing the goods from Canada who has to bear who has to pay the tariff duty when they're trying to clear their product from the borders. And ultimately, same goes for Canada. If you are buying something from the grocery store in Canada, well, that grocery store had to import that good from US, and when they release get the clearance from the border for their product, they have to pay the 25% tariff duty. And ultimately, that grocery store or that manufacturer, whatever they're importing from US, they are going to have to be able to pay even more, which they're going to be passing the cost onto the consumer, onto you when you buy your apples, your bananas, your oranges, your grocery, your produce items, your fruits and vegetables from grocery stores, and any other product as well that you might buy outside this industry. And this is what I feel like. The two items that are going to that are going to have the biggest impact because of the tariffs, and these items are going to have the fastest impact right now in the coming weeks, are going to be the produce, which is fruits and vegetables, and the personal care and development items. Produce such as fruits, vegetables, meat, and everything that is edible that you're importing from the US, and the personal care items that you're bringing from the US, such as your shampoo, your conditioners, your beauty products, your gadgets, anything that you're importing that you're using every single day. Now, when I say fruits and vegetables, given the weather in Canada, we don't have a lot of provinces in Canada that have a stable weather, and the provinces that are rich in agriculture and in farming, they face a very unstable weather where they have to go through 7 or 8 months of very cold and harsh conditions and 4 months of summer. And if you have only 3 or 4 months of summer, that is not enough to grow certain crops. And as a result, we Canadians, we have to import more stuff from US than US has to import from Canada. What that means, if we have the bulk of food that is being sold in Canadian grocery stores being imported from the US, ultimately when tariffs are imposed, the same apple that you're buying right now for $3 or for $4, you are going to have to pay additional 25% to buy. So the whole grocery item that you're buying is going to be increased by another 25%. Your receipt, your bill is going to be even more expensive now. And for some people, it might be okay, but for a lot of Canadians, this is going to be even more difficult given the headlines that we saw earlier this year that almost 70% of Canadians right now are buying their food from food banks. So this is something very interesting point right now in Canadian economy that a lot of people are going to be seeing right now. And when we talk about the personal care items that are going to be impacted, we'll talk about the shampoos, talk about the conditioners, talk about the beauty products that your wives, your girlfriends, the men that are using, talk about the shaving creams. How many of you shave regularly, Sunny? I shave almost 3 times a week. Some people might shave 2 times a week. Have you seen the razors that you are buying? Most of the razors that are being sold in Canada, that are being sold in Walmarts and Costco's of Canada, are Gillette, the biggest product, the biggest brand which is selling the razors, the shaving cream, and the shaving product right now is Gillette. Talk about the toothbrushes, the electric toothbrushes that you guys are buying, the Oral-B's of the world. Talk about the toothpaste that you are using, Colgate's, and all the various other brands. These are some of the brands which the Canadians are importing from the US. This is something you guys are going to have to pay even more now.
Inflation on one side, tariff on the other side. So I don't know. There's going to be a big squeeze for the consumer in Canada and in US as well. However, our economy is tied really heavily with the US right now. So that is what I feel like, that the tensions are going to rise up and the squeeze is going to get deeper and deeper for going towards deeper pockets for the consumers in Canada. And uh, and hopefully there should be new policies and regulations in place that could increase the domestic in GDP for Canadian government.
If you're going to have higher prices, in my opinion, there's a lot that the government can do right now. For starters, we can check this out, Sunny. The Canadian government just came out with a new plan where they are introducing a $6 billion trade war aid package for the Canadians, for the small businesses. And if you don't have a business right now, and if you're thinking about starting a new business, this is something you can take an advantage of, where you can apply for the funding. You have to comply with some of the provision and regulation in the new program, the new provision. It is just recently announced in the first week of March 2025. But this is something extremely new right now. But some of the provisions that I have read already through is that if you apply funding through this program, you cannot lay off the employees that you hire, and only those businesses can actually get funding from this business who have currently less than 500 employees. And there are going to be several other provisions that I haven't read yet, but it's going to be very fun to see how the government comes out to save the businesses during this tariff um, war with the US. And I also think, in my opinion, that Canada should have, from the very beginning, regardless of the tariffs that are being imposed by the US, I think Canada should have even stronger ties with the EU, should have even stronger ties with the Middle East, should have even stronger ties with the Asian continent in terms of trade. If US, why is it that Canada is exporting 80% of their goods to the US? Why is Canada only reliant on US? And if US slapped 25% tariffs, the whole Canadian government is completely into shambles right now. I mean, ultimately, Canadians are going to have to suffer more than US citizens have to. And this is only because the Liberal government barely paid any attention to creating stronger ties with other countries when it comes to trade agreements. They should look at how to, in my opinion, get stronger ties with the European Union under the Canada and EU trade agreements. Um, but it is going to be extremely interesting to see in the future as we are moving into this trade war, Sunny.
There was a survey by CFIB, Canadian Federation of Independent Businesses. What they found was 60% of the small businesses face difficulty accessing credit in 2023. Um, And that is a bigger portion of the economy. Now, we already know 98% of the employment that we have in Canada is through small businesses. Imagine that 8 million Canadians are employed by small businesses. And then how are they dealing with all of this? Now, there's a lot of things that come in place when the inflation is higher. Now, coping with rising cost of goods and services, they have a greater impact to the economy than we even think about. Now, imagine this: inflation peaked at 8.1% in mid 2022. That raised costs for all the raw materials for all the small businesses in place. Now, small businesses had to increase their pricing as well. What did that lead to? That lead to a low consumer demand, a low consumer demand for already the employers that are struggling to get some sort of relief from the government. What did that lead to? That leads to high rise in unemployment. And how are we going to grow in an economy that constrains the small businesses to work effectively and efficiently? And that is how the Canadian government would be looking towards in the coming year as well.
Yeah, like I said, it's going to be very interesting to watch out for the landscape. Anyways, thank you so much for all the valuement viewers and listeners. We really appreciate you guys watching. And if you do like our segment, do consider liking and subscribing this video channel. Have a great one, Canadians. Take care.